Hi guys. This is the first of several videos that we're going to be talking about for white paper in English 42101. And this is going to be talking about the biggest thing that you have due at the end of the semester, the big white paper, which we've been kind of talking about throughout the semester, as the white paper is the culmination of all of these things that you've written so far. Right now, I just want to go over this assignment sheet so that you are prepared and ready to do all the things that you need to do. You can find this thing that I'm looking at here in the important course documents. I've introduced it before, but again, if you haven't been able to find that, make sure you go to our class in Brightspace and find those important course documents where it says big assignments, and then you'll be able to preview this white paper along with several student samples. So back at the beginning of the course, I talked to you about the differences between primary and secondary styles. And this is again where we want to spend a little bit more time talking through that because you're getting to the middle and most of you know what you're doing, but some of you are still a little confused, right? Here. So primary research, the first thing to notice here when we're looking through this sheet is that in the overview, is that I'm asking you to think about what we talked about. And if you recall, primary research is data that you've gathered yourself or you've collected yourself, such as a prototype that you're creating or building, or maybe a survey or an interview that you've done of someone who's done something like this. There's a lot of different kinds of primary research. And many of you that are concurrently taking senior design are going to be in that particular boat. Not all of you are. Some of you are also in secondary research, right? And that is the compiling of sources that have come from other researchers, right? So if you are doing that kind, perhaps you're an English major or a different kind of major that is in this particular class, and you're spending your time collecting sources and reading about other things, then you are doing primarily secondary research, right? And you'll spend a lot of time in the library and databases, maybe meeting with a librarian and that sort of thing. No matter what your project, whether it's primary or secondary, whatever you've opted to go with, whatever most makes the most sense for you, the white paper requirements are going to be the same. Things to keep in mind, the white paper is the largest document, the largest grade for this particular class. There are assignments before and after as we move along. All of them relate to it. But the white paper itself is worth 35% of your grade, or 1/3 of your grade. So it is the culmination of this semester-long thing that you have been doing. Now, the final document you submit to me is going to include both written text and visuals, right? Keep that in mind, both visuals. The visuals will, of course, vary depending on whether you're doing primary and taking pictures yourself or secondary, in which you're illustrating things that you're seeing, which even could be screenshots of something that you are seeing. We'll get to some options for that as we move along. Either way, you're going to have to consider how you're going to purvey that information, right? So the first question I always get in every English class, professional writing or not, is how long does it have to be? Right, how long does it have to be? Well, in technical writing, that is also the question that is foremost in your mind. How long does it have to be? And the answer to that is not one you're going to particularly like, because it will vary wildly. Usually those of you in primary research are probably going to have shorter papers because you'll have more visuals, more data. Those of you doing secondary sources will have longer papers, like even up to 15 pages long, where because you're talking about all the different sources that you have found of other people, right? And maybe quoting from them. So those tend to be longer. It's all about quality, not quantity. And technical writing research writing rules are, of course, to be clear, concise, and coherent, the 3 C's we've talked about. So those are things we care about. Those are things we are really interested in. But short doesn't necessarily mean good. Long doesn't necessarily mean good. We have to be clear, coherent, and concise. Okay. So obviously this white paper is going to be of sufficient quality to encompass an entire senior level semester long project, right? So it has to be something of great worth. All right, so things to keep in mind. One thing to keep in mind that you've done some writing already. You've done a sizable amount of writing already. You've done a proposal, you've done a progress report. Some of those documents contain information that you're going to be able to use in the white paper. That's the idea, that the writing will be continued to be massaged and edited and continually used. Now, some of you have changed topics along the way, some of you have changed angles along the way, so that of course matters. But some of the, if your project has been linear, then a lot of the writing that you've done may be used kind of like what we might call a toolkit, right? You have a toolkit in technical writing in which you continually reuse some of the same ideas and think through your audience. Who's my audience now? Well, I might need to change it to make sense to this particular audience, but I already have the idea, I already have the data. So keep in mind that we started with the proposal. The proposal is, what will I do? Future. Then we had the progress report, what am I doing? Right, so current. And then the white paper is past. What did I do? It's what have I already done? Here's all of the information at once. So that's this overview that you're going to have in the white paper itself. Okay, let's move along to what some of the document requirements are going to be. What are you going to have in this eventually when you write it? Well, first is an abstract or an executive summary. The abstract tends to be a paragraph. That's about 200 words. It will not be like just 2 sentences. It needs to be a little bit more than that, but it also shouldn't go on and on. In an executive summary, that tends to be a little bit more, a little bit longer. Maybe a 1-page, maybe a little bit longer overview of the entire document. But those are the 2 things that you will have as first, right? An abstract or an executive summary will be the first thing I see in the white paper itself. Then you're going to have a section that is an introduction. It's going to be a further overview of the project and the background, right? So in your proposal, you did a little bit with this, but it probably was along the lines of the following proposal does X, Y, and Z. So this introduction needs to be a little bit longer. It needs to explain the background, the history, the context of this thing that you're going to be researching, but still concise. Okay. Then you're going to have a methods section. The methods section has to be here. I'm going to be going over what the different sections are, but you'll notice that we should still continue to follow IMRAD, IMRAD, and that's Introduction, Methods, Results, Discussions. Sometimes people use that little A, IMRAD, as analysis. In this class, it's probably, we're probably going to stick more into just the introduction, methods, results, and discussion. But we'll talk about more of those things in future videos. So no matter what kind of research you did, primary or secondary, or half and half, it's going to follow the same set of patterns or protocols to get from point A to point B. This is that section where you describe how that happened for you. So again, some examples that you might have done. If you are in the natural sciences, for example, you might have done a hypothesis testing. How did that work? What did you do? What was the context of the method, right? How did you go about the testing? If you did a survey or primary research or introductions or interviews, how did you collect that data? How did you do what you did? Now, you will probably include in an appendix here a copy of your survey or a copy of your interview questions or even a transcript. So again, we can see that we can see exactly what you've done in the methods. If you did secondary research and you're thinking, what about the secondary research stuff? You still had a kind of method that you use for collecting your sources, correct? So how did you find the sources? How did you annotate the sources? How did you decide which sources were the ones you needed? How did you eliminate sources? So some sort of theme or coding that occurs as you're trying to figure out how you're doing the research. How did you do it? We want to know what your methods were. Now, if you happen to be in engineering or one of the computer sciences and you're also doing a senior project, you're going to be also talking here about the methods for designing, building, testing that thing that you created, whether it's a widget, a thing, an idea, an application, a software. How did you do it? So especially explain the testing. Go into detail there. How did you do stress tests? How did you collect the data? How did you get the results of the data? How did you gather the data? All those things. And keep in mind that you're talking to an audience that is a lay audience and not an engineering audience. So you have to be able to find a way to explain that. Okay. Which brings us to results. The explanation of data results or testing or a hypothesis or survey or literature review, right? Now, some people get confused at this point a lot, especially if you are in engineering or computer science, and suddenly you'll write I'll get the white paper, I'll be looking at it, and there'll be like 7 pages of raw data or screenshots. Remember, that is not the purpose of this. You are supposed to put your results in a digestible format for an audience that is not engineers, right? So we have to find a way to do that. You're going to have to think that through in various ways and maybe test it on people to say, is this readable? To someone who's not in my particular field, but they're experts in other fields, are they going to be able to understand what I'm trying to do here? So you're going to have to find a way to do that. Same with survey results. You might have a methods class that goes over some of the methods of how you've done that. You may not. But in general, we want some tables or graphs or charts to help show what the results were so we can easily digest and understand them. This is useful for a future boss as well. You don't want to bore them or confuse them. You want the information to be clear. So we need you to think through ways that you can clarify the data for a layperson that's not in your particular field. Okay, so again, those of you in secondary research, this is where your literature review is going to reside, right? Different schools of thought there, right? Because we could find the literature review in various different areas of this particular paper. I am cool with you putting the literature review in the results because those are the results of what you found. Number of sources. Remember that primary research projects, those of you who are creating a thing, you still want to go out and find other context, right? What have other people done with this particular field? Maybe those are people, maybe those are sources, maybe you've done interviews, but you probably should have at least 3 to 5 sources to help give background, help give context, and so on. If you are doing secondary research, this has to be a minimum of 20 sources, minimum, the bare minimum, right? Okay, so do not forget that that's the case. Explanation of findings. This section is going to be the longest of any scientific paper or white paper that you might particularly see, and that's the explanation of the significance of the findings. Here's the things, here's the data that I found, here's the significance of it. So you're going to summarize your key results and help us, again, interpret what they mean. You're going to discuss why the results or implications matter. And that's a simple thing to say, but it's much more difficult to do. This section might be difficult for you to try and explain to a lay audience. But there's going to be several examples on white paper of what other students have done, so you can see what that looks like. Both of primary, secondary, and of various different styles and majors. So make sure that you take a look at them and they make sense to you. And if you've got questions, please ask. I encourage you to meet with me a second time. I will give you an option to do that, probably via phone conference. That's what most of you will do. But I am available to check with and to talk this stuff through. So in conclusion, last thing is conclusion. And there's different schools of thought here about your results and recommendations back in here, but some of those fit better in the conclusion where you summarize your report again and talk about things you weren't able to accomplish. What could you not finish? What could you not do? What do you recommend other people who study your stuff do in the future? And then again, we're going to talk through a little bit of document design. Make sure that you have taken a look at that for the future. Last reminder, most of you are going to be using IEEE format. And some of you will be in other fields such as APA, but we're going to talk that through and you're going to get that approved. So for now, that is what we're talking about at this particular time. And if you've got questions, you can contact me at my email. And have a great week.